Hey neighbors, Kevin here with etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Progressive Dynamics replacement converter section here on our 2012 Casita Spirit Travel Trailer. There are a couple of reasons why you'd want to swap out your converter section on your main panel here. Typically what we see in most cases is going to be, hey, this is no longer charging my battery, or I'm switching over to lithium batteries and I need something that's going to be compatible. With this converter section, it is going to allow you to switch over a jumper, so that way you can easily switch over to that lithium profile. And if maybe you sell the trailer later on and the next person doesn't have lithium and they have lead acid instead, they could switch it right back by just moving that jumper over. Another benefit of this system is that it's going to have multi-stage charging. So now instead of that old converter that just maybe only had one charging mode, this is now going to have 4 charging modes, so that it is properly recharging the battery and maintaining it so you can get more of a life cycle out of it instead of having that lower down and then now you're replacing the battery quicker than you needed to. And then one other thing that I do like about this is we're switching from 9 fuse ports up to 12, so we do have additional space in case we decide to install any other 12-volt appliances within our trailer. We look at the mode right here, you can see that that light is a solid green. That means that our charging stage is our battery is pretty much fully charged. You'll see it blink in different patterns depending on which mode you're in. And if you were wanting to force a different mode, all you'd have to do is just press that little button right there. Depending on which way you're doing it, you'd either press it or hold it. So there's going to be 4 different stages, because this is now a multi-stage charger. As long as it is still on lead acid, if you switch over to lithium, you're going to lose that multi-stage charging just because there isn't one yet for a lithium battery. But in that lead acid setup, like what we have with our neighbor's trailer today, the 4 settings or stages are going to be boost mode, which typically that's if your battery's drained. Say you left your trailer out for a long time in storage, you come back and need to get it hooked up and fully charged back up. That boost mode is going to give you a higher voltage, and that's going to give you a quicker charge to get you back into that 90% charge rate on your battery bank. And then from there, there's also normal, which would typically cover from anywhere from like 50% up to 90% of your charge. After that, there's also storage. And what that mode is going to do is just a very low voltage, and that's just going to help mitigate any kind of self-discharge. So typically if you have a lead acid battery, it's going to discharge a lot faster than a lithium battery, which would have a very, very low discharge rate. And then the final stage is going to be equalization, and that is just to prevent stratification and sulfate buildup. Typically with those lead acid batteries, you'll have sulfate build up into it, and then it ruins that battery over time. So having that equalization to help kind of clean it up, make sure that it's properly recharging, is going to give you more life cycles with the battery each time you recharge it. When we're looking to swap out our converter section, there's a few important things that we're going to need to know. First, the brand itself. So this one is Parallax. Our Progressive Dynamics converter section replacements are going to work with the Parallax, Magnatech, and Wifco brands, but only for certain specific models. So that's where we need to look at this sticker over here, where it says the model, and we got a 7345. Now typically the last 2 digits on that model number are always going to be that amperage, which you can also see right above it says 45 amps. So when we're looking at replacing this, we want to make sure that we're picking out the correct one. Each of these we have labeled on our site to show which one it'll actually work with. And then when you look at the instructions itself, there are different instructions depending on which model you have. So if we had a different one here that was still within that 45 amps, there's even a separate piece, the little plastic piece that we put in here to actually help mount this in place. You might even find that there's some other things that people have done throughout the years to where maybe that converter section is not going to fit in there perfectly, and you might have to make some alterations as well. With that being said, we can take a closer look and we can show you a couple of the charge modes and exactly how to get that switched over to lithium. So if you take a closer look, our fan just kicked on, which means it just got hot enough for the temperature to kick over and turn that on. A lot of times we get questions because people can't hear the fan, especially once the cover is put back on, but that is just how quiet this fan is. It's still going to be putting out enough force to force all that hot air out and exhaust it out, so that way the unit itself doesn't overheat. But in any event, if this actually did fail or something happened to it, maybe you kicked it or something like that and it broke, this does have overheating protection as well, so it will blow a fuse and give you an error code. That way you don't end up having everything get ruined. You can maybe just replace one little section of it instead. Along with that, there are the reverse polarity fuses. So if you accidentally hook up your battery backwards, you're not going to have to worry about this blowing and getting damaged or damaging any of your equipment that's connected to it. You would just have to replace those 30 amp fuses. And there's also an overload and a short circuit protection, as well as over voltage and under voltage. So maybe you're a little bit too high, maybe you hook up to something that you're not supposed to, maybe you accidentally mixed into that 120 instead of hooking it up to a 12 volt, and you blow the fuse, you can swap it out and be good to go. Down here on our converter panel, so this is our circuit board for our converter section. If you look real closely, there's a spot right here. There's two boxes. One says Wiz, W-I-Z, and then the box under it says Li. And what that means is if you have a lead acid battery that's compatible with the Charge Wizard, we want our little black jumper, which is this guy right here on this white post, in the forward position, so that way it's picking up that Wiz setting. If you have a lithium battery and you're wanting to convert over to lithium charging, then you'll want to pull off this little black jumper right here and switch it over to the middle post and the rear post for the lithium setting. So as far as this install goes, this is something you could do yourself. Just take the time, make sure you set a hour or two aside. It's really not hard unless you have like a ton of stuff that you're swapping over, or maybe the wires are a little bit too short. But this is something you can do yourself. Just make sure you disconnect power from your battery as well as from shore power. You don't want to have anything live while you're working in your distribution panel at all. That's how you can end up either hurting yourself or hurting your appliances. So if you are not comfortable with working with electrical, feel free to use our dealer locator. You can look up a shop within your zip code and find someone to get your panel installed. But if you do want to do it yourself, stick around. We're about to get to the install. Starting off our install, I've already disconnected from shore power, and I've also disconnected from the battery, so that way we have nothing live in here at all. There's no chance of anything accidentally shorting out just because we're playing around with anything in here. Now, since we're keeping the main panel, so this section right here where it has the AC side of it with our circuit breakers, we're just going to slowly kind of pull each part out. Right here is our converter section, and our neighbor already took a few of the screws out and also removed the cover. So right now, only thing holding this in is just one screw, which we can set right up there. And when we start to kind of pull this out, you'll see you got some cables that are running up to our DC distribution panel. And this is also where we're going to have our battery come in. And the converter, like I said, is right down here. So this is what powers up and sends power over to the DC side. So that way it drops it down from that 120 volts over to 12 volt. Powering that, and then also recharges your battery. So if you're hanging up on that, which it looks like we are gonna, just because those wires are pretty short and it's all kind of cramped in there, we can start disconnecting this first. Just make note, what you can do is as you pull off one part, you can take some painter's tape and label it, and then just wrap it around that wire. That way you know exactly what you got, just in case the old installer, whoever put that in, didn't use different wire colors, or if there's just too many colors or too many of the same color in there. Luckily ours is not mix and match too bad, so shouldn't be easy to swap, or should be easy to swap, sorry. So right here's our battery connection. I'm just popping that down. Pop that out, and I am going to actually label each one of these wires, because these are all running out to our DC appliances. So that way we're making sure they're swapping back over to the correct spot, and it'll match up with the label that's in our cover. So if you look at the cover down here on the DC side, it has it all labeled. Since we're going to be reusing this whole panel, I want to keep this exactly the same. That way if the next person has an issue, maybe the water pump's throwing something up and needs to be worked on, that's where we'd come back and look, okay, this first one is our water pump. Now I know exactly what I need to do. So grab some tape and a marker. Now that I have all these pulled off and labeled for what terminal they were in before, I've got our power running to our battery out. Last thing here is power to the board from the converter. So we'll pop that off too. There we go. Right here should be our screw that holds the whole panel in. Pop that loose. And we're hanging up. We got another one right over here. Now we can pull the distribution panel out, and then on the back side looks like we have our... So I'm going to pull that separate. Make sure we keep that away so when we switch over to a new one, we're putting the correct wires in. Now that we have the distribution panel out of the way, we can start moving out the converter section, which is going to require forcing these wires back down through it. So that was our ground and power from the converter section. And we should be able to get this fully out. Now on the AC side, we will also have to remove this little cover. Spare screwdriver. Aside, and now we can pull off. We have a spot for our converter, so it looks like it's running into this right here, although it looks like they have both of them crimped together, so that's not really separating the two between those breakers. So that's something we'll need to fix as well. And we can also disconnect it from the neutral bus bar. Taking a closer look at this, it looks like, so we've got one set of wire coming in, another set of wire coming in. They're all spliced together and then ran to the same as our converter. Converter should always be put alone on its own. Does not need to be mixed with anything else. You run the risk of overloading it and blowing it, and then you could end up damaging your converter, or you just lose all power to your trailer because your converter's blown. Now you got a blown fuse. So we're going to disconnect that, and luckily there are some spares in here, so I will end up switching whatever these other two items are over to that spare, so that way we're not overloading this, and so that way the converter's on its own. But to do so, we'll have to disconnect it from our breaker. It's thinner screwdriver. And we'll remove this wire nut as well. Now on our new one, I've flip-flopped the wires around just because of how our setup is. We want to have the black and white wires that are thicker running up to our DC distribution panel. That's going to be this guy right here. And then I ran the 3 wires, our power, ground, and neutral, up for our AC side up through this other hole over here, because where they sit, it's kind of crisscrossed. So they don't have it already ran through for you, just depending on which model you're switching out, because this will work for a few different versions as well. So with that said, now we're going to trace these up through the 2 holes that are right here, so that way we can get these all installed. But it's a little bit easier if you start those first and then try to slide the converter in, just because it's such a tight fit. Looks like the ground I'll have to do last. There we go. Keep pulling it through. And one other thing, I might not even have to. So the original converter section, they had a little notch cut out right here so that the bracket would fit. I think I'm going to just have it sit over it so that way all of our mounting holes line up. And then we don't have to notch it either. Just have that screw hold it down after. A little bit extra protection holding that too. Well, it doesn't really feel like it's threading into much. Now that we have all of our wiring pushed through, we can put on our DC distribution panel. So we're going to be going through that hole right there, and that lines right up with these two holes that we were originally using. And I'm reusing the same hardware that was holding our previous panel in place. This one is a little bit bigger, so you'll probably have a little bit of a challenge getting it in. But if you get it lined up and get one of them started, you can get the next one. Have it hold itself up at that point. All right, now we can bring our other wires up. So these wires here were for our battery. And we want our battery positive, so the positive is going to have to come all the way over here. We'll have our battery negative and our converter negative over here. Before we get to that point, we need to loosen up the lugs here. I'm going to be using a 5/32 Allen key, and we'll just loosen those up. That's just the setup though, unfortunately. Based on the way this is laid out, I felt it was a lot cleaner to actually take the panel back off, and I flipped all the wiring up through the back, through that mounting bracket. That way it can just kind of come over the top, and we got plenty of space here for all of our fuses, and that way it's not a hassle with a wire coming up right here and blocking it all. But while we're here, I've already got the battery neutral. I'm going to try and push that in. Now this is a lot tighter doing it this way, because now I have to try and force it at a right angle down into here. So if you do it this way, you'll struggle a little bit, but overall it's going to look a whole lot nicer. Get some pliers involved here. And right now I'm putting in the positive for our battery. Cables in a bit more, get it nice and tight in there, and then we can come back and tighten it up. We'll pull, make sure that there's no loose. And last one here is going to be for our converter positive. I need to pull it out a bit and kind of angle it. Loosen that up a bit more. And we'll slot that through. Tighten it back up. Probably have that went in a little too much. There we go. So if we took a closer look at our ports, you can see they're all labeled. And anytime you have an issue, the little LEDs that are built into this will blow up red. That way you know exactly which fuse is blown in here without having to pull the fuse out and check it, or put a tester on it. So, and if you don't know how to look at a fuse, you can see, oh, if I don't drop it. If you look very closely on the inside, you can see that little band. If the fuse is blown, that band will blow out completely. You'll see it kind of explode out. Yeah, but the rest of the fuse will look exactly the same. You won't notice a difference. So it's really easy, typically with any other kind of panel, to not know that your fuse is blown. But luckily with this new one, the LEDs will just tell us right away. Now that we have all of that put in with our power and ground from the converter and the battery, I'm going to start wiring in all of my different functions here. So I'm going to write these down. Now I am going to consolidate all these just because we only had 9 spots before. Now we have 12. So I'm just going to go 1 through 12. And starting with number 1, we have our water pump. So on here I'll write water pump. and that is rated for 15 amps. So right above amps, I'm writing 15, and we can just keep rolling. That way later on, say the fuse blows and you're not too comfortable with this, maybe this is someone else's trailer later on down the road and they don't really know what they're looking at least they can come by and look at this and say, hey, I know this is 15 amps. That's what I need to replace it with. Now that I have it all labeled, I'm going to cut off the old distribution panel for the DC side. And I've removed that because we no longer need that since we have a new converter. Put on the new one, but I did leave the AC side just in case they have any questions. I left that operating guide in there. And also, it's kind of peeling up, so this sticker here is going to help hold that down for a good while longer. As I do this, I'm going to pull off all that tape too. We don't need to keep it on there. But down here at our connection point, it is just a Phillips head screw. We'll just loosen that up a bit. Stick in our wire. Tighten it back down. Making sure that that's fully up there. I got a little bit branched out there. Let me tighten that up. So now that I have every one of our wires swapped over, now we can install our fuses. The only fuses they're going to give you are for the reverse protection and overload, and that's going to be these two 30 amp ones right here. So any other kind of fuses that you need, you'll have to purchase separately, or just what I'm doing right now is swapping them over from the previous panel. But of course, they are a little slippery here. There we go. We'll just pop that right in, and that just presses into place. Sometimes pulling them out of the input is a bit of a challenge, so you might want to have a pair of pliers handy with you. Make sure I'm making full contact. It's fully in on both sides. And now, even though we don't have anything hooked up to that, I do have those two in there as spares. That way, if ever there's a need, there'll be one ready. The 30 I'm not going to put into a spot, but I'll just stick it in there. That way, if one of these two blows, we have a backup. Don't have to go and try and find a hardware store while you're out and about. Same with the other one too. Before we get any further from our DC side, we can also connect the harness that we have here. It's this 4-wire harness, and this just communicates between the converter section and the DC distribution panel. There's also your mode select button over here, and that's kind of all how your battery gets charged. So these two pieces need to be able to communicate properly. If you're looking at it on the connector itself, it's going to have two little tabs that poke out. Those tabs are going to be facing out when we plug in, because there's a little clip on the back side of this, and it's going to bite into that little lip that's right here. So we'll want to make sure that we do this correctly on both up here on our panel, and then also down here for our converter. But before I do that, I am going to try and fish this up through here. Have this be clean install here. And actually, it might be easier to just fish it down. Get some wires in the way. And let me take a look. There we go. Once we get through, I'm going to have it sit behind the white and black wire so it doesn't interfere with our fan. We can pop this side in. And down here as well. Alright, with that clipped in, next we can start attaching our AC side. So the black wire is going to be our positive. That's going to go to that breaker that's made just for your converter. And then we'll have a ground and a neutral. So when we look at our bus bars here, I got an open space here. I don't have one on the ground, so we will be sharing a spot with the ground, but it ain't the end of the world because these are bus bars second you touch any part of this, it's hitting the whole bar. So for that, I think this one will probably be the best spot for me. So I'll loosen that up a bit. We'll slide in our ground. Tighten it back up. We'll give it a little pull test too, make sure both wires are nice and tight in there and secure. For our neutral, I'm loosening up a spot for it. There is an open one, so we don't have to share with anybody else. Pop that in, tighten it down. Give it a little tug, nice and good. All right, and for the power, I'm also going to cut off just a bit. They give you a lot to work with here. It's going to be a bit too much for that circuit breaker. And our blank for that is this guy right here. So I'm going to slide him up into place, and then we can tighten down that screw. And same thing, give it a little tug. Make sure it's not going anywhere, and we can slide that all in. Tuck it back, and then the last thing to do is going to be just putting in the screws that held our old converter section back in with our new one, so that way it's nice and secure. Now before we test anything, I am going to reinstall the plate for the AC side of our converter section. Our control panel, I should say, just to be safe. And then we can hook back up to power and make sure everything's functioning properly. Now that we have everything buttoned up, I wanted to double check power before we put our panel back on, because this is an older style where you have to screw it back on and then it just stays on. So the only thing you can see is from that section down. Taking a look at it, you can see we have a green light that's showing that we're on, and it's charging the batteries because we're plugged into shore power. We don't have any error codes with any of our fuses, so we know everything's good right now. And we can test a few things. I already heard, as soon as I plugged in the shore power, the microwave came on. We could hear that. Let's pick a 12-volt thing in here to turn on as well, so our range hood is running to the DC side. So lights are coming on, sound from the fan running. So we know everything is running smoothly, and we can finish up our install by just popping on the cover. There is another sticker that wouldn't hurt to throw on here as well. So we replaced that one sticker showing how the DC side is separated. We can also throw on this saying that the converter has been replaced with a Progressive Dynamics one. That way, if anyone ever has an issue down the road, they know exactly what to look for. They can look up the owner's manual if it's not still in here and be able to troubleshoot or replace if needed. All right, now with everything checked, I'm closing this up. So they do give you some new screws because the previous screws that went through that actually match the cover don't match the thread size for our new converter section. So, but the screw heads were a little bit smaller, so I also picked up a couple washers and just use that to make sure we're getting a nice tight fit here. Once this is in place, then anytime we need to work on it, all we have to do is just pop open the top section. We can see our AC and DC distribution panels. Well, I think that does it for today's look at and installation of the Progressive Dynamics converter section replacement here on our 2012 Casita Spirit Travel Trailer. My name's Kevin. If this video didn't help you, or you're still looking for the right replacement for your converter, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department, and we'd be happy to help you out on your journey.